Hi, I'm Billy Earney, and I'm giving a talk about PySchool.net. This is a project I've been working on for about 6 months, off and on and off during my free time. This is my contact information, and travel's been provided by my boss, which is Miller's Professional Imaging. And I don't know if any of you guys have heard of MPIX, but it's an online application that lets you develop pictures, and so you may want to check that out sometime. What PySchool is, what is it? It's a Python programming environment in a browser. It's powered by Brython, which is a Python transpiler that takes Python code, translates it into JavaScript, and executes that code in a browser. So it does not do what a lot of tools do, which is send back Python code to a server somewhere, execute that code, and then sends a result. Everything is done in the browser. What students can do with PySchool.net and educators as well is it allows them to be able to create, edit, save, and execute Python code directly in the browser. This allows educators to be able to reduce the amount of technology that's needed in the classroom. And that's part of what PySchool.net's directives are. It's 100% free for educators and students. There's no cost whatsoever. It reduces the technological burdens of hosting a programming class. Most of your school districts may have one or two IT people, and they're really stretched very thin between multiple school buildings. And so by reducing that burden, it allows teachers to be able to teach better classes and not have to rely on IT staff as much. This project is 100% open source, which means that you can download it, you can contribute to the project, you can make modifications to it, you can fork it, whatever you want to do. For an online version, which since a lot of people have internet access, especially in the United States and many places in the world, we provide an online solution automatically for most people to help reduce that technological burden at PySchool.net. Early in the project, as I was describing how I was wanting to put this together, I said I was going to put all this on a website and just make it work that way. There were a few people that had issues with that. It was like, well, I live in a place that, the internet's really spotty. I want to be able to have my own server and be able to teach kids in an environment where the internet can go up and down, and the speed, there could be bad speed, so on and so forth. So as I was developing that, I kept that in mind as well, so that people could take a copy of this and could have it locally in their own school district, or could install it on a small server and host that themselves on an intranet in a school building somewhere, and could host PySchool.net there. Goals and challenges. Luckily, Brython does a lot of the heavy lifting, like, for example, taking the code and translating it and executing it. Some of the issues I had to think about is, okay, since we're executing this in a browser environment, there's not really a concept of being able to save files, or there is the local storage or stuff like that, but how we think of normal files in a file system, that really doesn't exist. So I had to solve some of those types of issues by emulating a file system. For the website and for a local server environment, you just send that data over the internet or through the network, and it can save it on a server. If somebody is running the service locally and it's just on their PC, it actually saves the files to their local storage, and it doesn't have to interact with another server. There's also, whenever you're dealing with sharing modules, what are you going to do if an instructor creates a module and is like, okay, I want the class to be able to use this module as a starter code or as does some of the heavy lifting, and I want the kids to work on, for loops or, if statements, stuff like that. We need a way to be able to allow an educator to easily share a module. So that was another issue I had to resolve. And one that I'm looking at right now is actually how to submit homework to a grader or educator. The first part of this project was just to create the interface for the students to be able to log on, use the application, save, and execute things. Then we actually put that out in the field a little bit, let people use it, and it seems like that they were pretty happy with that part of it. But the next question was, okay, how do I get the homework from the kids? Some of the current solutions has been that the instructor knows the user ID and password. He just goes in, looks at the code. And I guess that works okay, but that's not really efficient. So I've been wanting to come up with a way that's much more efficient to where whenever a student is done submitting the code, or is done writing the code, they can submit it, and the educator can then look at that output and then can grade it. Now how the educator is going to get that back to the student, I figure that's going to be the next step. I'll have to figure out how to solve that, but I figure I'll solve these one pieces at a time. Okay, time for the demos, which is what this is all about. Now, they really don't give you a lot of room here, do they? Okay. So first thing that you do is you need to log on, and you can choose if you want to save it locally, which doesn't require a user ID and password, or you can save it to the server, which depending on if it's more of a centralized server in a school or on the PySchool.net website. Right now I'm running something local because I didn't want to really depend on I've got a server running on my local machine here because I didn't want to rely on the internet. So what you could do is type in a user ID and password, which this isn't going to work because I haven't created an account yet. So you'd click submit, an error message comes up. You can click on to create an account. It's as easy as just typing in a user ID and a password. Sign up, and I, of course, using the same user ID and password. So as you can notice right here, it says that the remote storage, that the storage that we're using is remote, and we're using Google Cloud for this. I'm using Google Application Engine back in the background for the server. And so if this was PySchool.net, if it was the real website, it'd be saving it to the Google Cloud. But since I'm running it locally on my PC here, it's actually the cloud on my PC. So this is the basic website. I wanted to keep this as basic as possible. I wanted there could be kids in kindergarten or first grade that are using the website, or it could be high school kids, it could be college kids. I didn't want to just put every feature in the world in this. I wanted to keep it pretty simple. So let's just create a simple application. You can click on New Tab. Let's just create a Hello World application, and let's save it, which it'll come up with Save As. Let's just say that it's called test.py, save the file. We can then execute it, and there's Hello World. So it's a simple Hello World problem or program. Nothing complex at all about that. That executes it in the browser. It does not do anything with a server or interacting anything. It's done completely in the sandbox. So here we've output data in this first tab here, which is the standard out. We also have two other tabs, which a lot of kids could want to write HTML code, do certain things. So I wanted to create different tabs for the different types of output. So here, kids could create tables, write HTML code. Actually, what it does is it outputs the results to this tab. And I'll show you an example that does that in a minute. And then there's also a shell tab. So if you say, well, what I remember there being a function that does something, but I can't remember exactly where that is. Well, here's your little, your little place where you can play around with things and see what works and what doesn't work. So let's say that we want to import some type of module and we want to see what's available in that module. Oops. Let's see if I can, let's see, dir sys, there we go. And it outputs all of the different variables and different functions that are available in the sys module. So going back to the, let's go back to this tab. One of the examples that we have here on the little welcome page is to be able to just output hello world in the P HTML tag. So we'll take that. We'll actually comment out this line of code. And let me move this over. I can execute this, and notice here it just says it was completed in 45 milliseconds. Well, actually the output was put here, hello world. So if you're writing HTML code, you could have it go to one or the other, and it'll actually render the HTML code in the PyDiv tab. Okay. Let's look at a few examples that we have in the gallery. And what this does is it's kind of hard to see because at the very bottom it has certain information there. But what I'm doing is I'm just passing pyschool.net a URL and saying, load this URL. You load the contents of this URL, which turns out to be a Python program. So here we have a Python program that actually has some information, some modules that are just for Brython. There's a browser, a browser module. It contains certain information on that deals kind of like what you think about with JavaScript, like the window object, the document, stuff like that. We've had to create our own little module to handle those things because that's not in regular Python. So what this does is if we execute this, it first just outputs information saying, hey, go look at this other div tab. We click on this, and it's actually a little game that kids can play around with. They can actually walk around the little walls. And the code for this is only, I think, a couple hundred lines of code here. 200, okay, about 300, well, 400 lines of code, which seems like a lot. But if somebody took something like this, like the arena here, that defines all the walls and the open space. So you could have kids that you take out parts of this, have them fill in certain parts of it, and then they could play the game. They could actually change the zeros and the ones, make different types of mazes, and could play around with that, which I think is kind of cool. For something that that's this graphical, that's pretty cool to be able to 400 or 500 lines of code to produce something like that. Let's see let's look at another example. See, how are we doing on time? I got a little bit of time. Yeah. Okay. Another graphical example is using the GlowScript gallery. GlowScript is a JavaScript library that allows you to be able to output graphical things like boxes, different types of shapes, and like circles and balls. So in about 36 lines of code, here we're able to produce a simple little box that allows a little ball to bounce around in it. So there's a lot of little things that you could do to make this, make it a little more challenging, or to change things about it and see how that affects the program. And this is all JavaScript. Brython can access JavaScript libraries and can you know, if you can do something in JavaScript, you can pretty much do it in Brython. It just takes the Python code and translates it into a JavaScript equivalent and then executes that code. And so PySchool.net is trying to use that. It's trying to leverage the strength of JavaScript in a browser with the ease of Python and merging those together and hoping that, you know, that combination with this interface, the ease of all of this can be used to help educators teach kids how to program. Let's see how many. I had a few other things I was wanting to show, and what I'm going to do is just pretty much describe it. Earlier I was talking about the submission portion of the project, where where a student, whenever they're done with an assignment, could go in and could submit a project. They could click on a homework assignment, say, okay, I want to submit homework assignment 2. Click that. They could click on a file that they're wanting to submit. Click open, and what happens is that would actually execute the code, and it creates a log of what's being done. It outputs, okay, here's the output. It saves that to a place in memory, and we say no. Let's say we don't want to run that again. Click OK. Is there other files we want to submit? Let's just say no, we don't want to submit anything. So here's an example of a submission, which it could be my name. I wrote this application, today's date, the homework assignment, the output, and then the source code here that the kid wrote. And so whenever you would click on submit, that would then submit that to the server and save that output. The instructor then could take that output. I assume I'd create an interface that allowed them to be able to print it out, maybe write on it, you know, make suggestions, and then I'm going to have to figure out how to go from that point, you know, forward. But to me, that seems like the next logical step, that it makes sense to, okay, let the kids be able to submit the assignment. Then, depending on the circumstance, you know, if this is an online class, maybe those results need to be emailed back to the kid. If it's a face-to-face thing, well, it seems like to me that, you know, a physical piece of paper handing to the kid would make sense. So I'm going to have to think about this a little bit more. But if people's got ideas, if they've got, you know, ideas on how to make this better, or certain environments, or you know, that this could be used in, or where, you know, improvements that could be made, I'm very willing to listen to those and to try to take those into consideration. So that's about it. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, thank you.
Is that loud enough? Can't tell. What users and schools have you been talking to pilot this for their needs and their particular situations that you've gleaned your requirements from?
A lot of it has been from people that have been involved with some of the programming involved with this. They're students. Some of them are students. Some of them are actually teachers themselves. And I haven't been real aggressive about going out and going to a school district and saying, hey, you know, will you use this? There were a few people on some of the Brython Google groups that was like, yeah, we want to use this. And so I've used some of them as test cases. Some of them are actually in different countries that are. There's one that's in Colombia that's in a remote school that he's set things up and used things. I hadn't gotten to the submission portion of it yet, and he come back with saying, okay, you know, the kids are you know, doing the assignments. It's working out great. I'm trying to figure out how can I grade these. And so his solution was to actually go in to each one of the kids' you know, using their user ID and password, looking at the assignments, and I assume leaving some type of comments or suggestions in the assignments, you know, and resaving them.
Conversation here.
Okay.
an idea, and unfortunately, I can't solve it for you. But I have a daughter going into the 9th grade, and she has, in the last 3 years, not submitted a single paper, project. Everything is online. Her school does use Google Docs, but at the junior high level, every teacher has 150 to 200 students. So I don't know if you've gone out and researched kind of how schools and the tools that some of the other services that are existing, they don't have I don't think, have a programming environment, but as far as doing submissions, they very definitely have some kind of framework, because I know that the teachers don't go in, with the kids' passwords and stuff like that, and that there is some umbrella that you might be able to leverage as a model to develop that type of thing. So.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I had finished developing this portion of it, and so I was thinking, okay, yeah, I'll get some feedback. As I want to develop so much and then get some feedback and develop some more. And this guy, he's all gung-ho, and he's like, oh, I'm going to start using them. I'm like, okay. But yeah, that's absolutely right. That's what I'm going to have to do, is I'm going to have to see what some of the different schools are doing. And what I'm guessing is that it's just all over the place. You know, people are doing a lot of different things. And this may be one way to standardize some of that, to be, at least whenever it comes to programming courses, to be able to say, okay, here's a way to submit the assignments, you know, figure out ways maybe that teachers want to grade the assignments and how to give them back to students. One of the major challenges is that I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. Just because of just creating the first part of this, I figured, hey, I'll just create a website, allow this to happen, then I got all these, things back from people saying, well, no, but I want to, you're making these assumptions. And, I was thinking, well, the internet access, I pretty much assumed that was a safe assumption, but it isn't. Maybe electricity, a lot of places electricity and just basic plumbing is, all that a lot of these people have. But yeah, I'll definitely keep that in mind. Those are some good suggestions. Anything else?
Yeah, actually, I have a question.
Okay.
So what parts of Python aren't available in Brython?
Most of the standard library is. There's probably a few minor standard libraries that we haven't gotten to yet. Then a lot of your things that deals with, a lot of your packages that deals with, that has like C on the underneath, that is a little more like your NumPy, stuff like that. We haven't gotten around to that yet. That's been a package that we've heard several times that people say, hey, is this available? And just because of the amount of labor it would take to try to translate that into pure Python is a big task. Something that we would like to do. We've looked at other things, maybe looking at like a Inscription or however you pronounce that takes C code and translates it into JavaScript. We should be able to use some stuff like that to be able to use that JavaScript output to then to be able to emulate something like a NumPy. So to answer your question, most of the standard library should be there, or if it isn't, we're definitely working on it. And if there's a library that you want that's in the standard library, let us know. Other modules that are pure Python should work, and if they don't, we're working on trying to make those work.
Great, thanks.
All right, thank you.